So welcome. If anybody's on the line, I think we've got about 2/3 of our attendees. It's 10:01, and I'm going to wait just another minute for those of you who are out there. We'll probably start about 10:02, 10:03. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It's 3 minutes after, and we've got a lot of good speakers today, so I'm going to start the webinar. Hopefully you all can hear me okay. My name is Gillian Middlestead. I'm with Tribal Healthy Homes Northwest, which is a working group. I think we have about 45 tribes as well as some agencies that are members in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska, and I'm also the moderator today. I think quite a few of you have actually been on some of our previous webinars, so welcome and bear with us if we have any technical difficulties, which do happen, but I think we're getting it down. And I think we've got great speakers today, so I'm going to jump right in, do a few introductory slides, and then within about 4 or 5 minutes we'll get started with our speakers. So for those of you on the call, you accepted the webinar invitation. You know that the focus of this webinar today is on if you're involved in any way in building tribal homes, renovating and repairing. What the take-home message today is that there's actually specific things you can do to build greener, to build healthier tribal housing that are sort of the low-lying fruit, things that, without going into a detailed program, that you can obtain through your procurement programs and start utilizing right away. Really quickly, our agenda for today, I think this slide to go down. Again, I'm going to give a brief introduction, and I actually have a couple polls. We have, I might have mentioned, we have over 85 tribes and agencies around the country registered, and so I want to get a quick snapshot of who's on the call. So the core content of today's webinar, the top 10 list, as we call it, our two presenters are Tor Peterson with Synthesis Consultants and Doug Kennedy of Pathway Construction. We're going to be on that for about 40 minutes. Then we get to some of the meat and potatoes as well, because there has to be resources and funding and technical support to use these products. So from 10:50 to 11:10, we have two people from HUD talking about funds and programs. Tom Carney is the Director of Grants Management with HUD's Office of Native American Programs. And David Vogt is the Sustainability Officer in the Alaska HUD Office of Native American Programs. So I'll give a brief bio on each of these speakers once we get to that point, but a few housekeeping things I want to mention. So there's a Q&A session the last 20 minutes, and I can't unmute everyone on the call, but what you'll do is that you should see a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and there's a question box where you can actually raise your hand and or type in a question. I'll see that question come up. If I can do this, I'll actually unmute you and have you direct your question to the speakers and panelists. If we have any glitches with that, go ahead and type your question in the chat box, and I will read it out loud. Okay. And my next slide. So just to briefly, I have a couple slides about the why of this webinar, and I already spoke to it. You know, when we're talking about building green and healthy homes, whether it's for tribal homes or other non-tribal programs, I think everyone here on this webinar understands the intrinsic value, that it's about preserving the asset, about building durable homes. It's about, in many respects, profoundly about the health of the occupants. And I think we're all on the same page that we understand the connection between chronic disease and the health effects of what's inside a home, how the home, both the materials and how the occupants live in the home. So there's no question that these programs have value. They bring energy efficiency and affordability into the equation. But, when I look at this is an example list that you're seeing on your screen right now of a combination of federal programs, state, local, private sector. And as you can see here, it's like a shopping list, and it's overwhelming. They all have merit. They have different requirements and different point systems. But when you have the majority of tribes, I work directly with the Tulalip tribes, and the majority of tribes I work with don't have a full-time staff dedicated to reviewing which programs are going to fit which building projects. And when they're doing a renovation, building, you have a, basically a very tight budget, and it's not like you can go ahead and send somebody out and have them identify the best program. That said, I know many, many tribes are doing a lot of these individual components on the ground. And that's really what this webinar is about, is saying, well, if we're not going to engage directly in any one of these specific programs, but we want to improve the health of our tribal families and our kids, and we want to create a more durable structure, what can we do right now, today? So our speakers are going to speak to these. These are really, this is the heart of it, is what materials are healthier than the ones that are commonly used today? Are they affordable and cost-effective? Are they durable and easy to maintain? And are they readily available from regional suppliers? So that's really what we're going to be addressing today. So what I'm going to do, actually I'm going to come back to these introductions for a minute. I have a couple other slides I wanted to point out, which is, and when we talk about funding later, the diagram, what I'm trying to illustrate from this is that in terms of grant dollars to support green and healthy building program, you can see on the bottom those dollar signs represent the fact that there's, not a ton of money, but there is a significant amount of different grant programs that will allow you to assess a structure and to evaluate and, in some cases, make minor improvements. But if you actually go in towards the grant categories where you can put in energy efficiency improvements, weatherize a home, improve ventilation, there are funding programs there, but again, there's fewer dollars for that. And then, as many of you know, it's even more competitive and difficult to find money where, it looks like this is an old slide, I have the word mold, but when you're doing actual rehabilitation in a home where you actually need to remove the occupants and have them place them somewhere else while you're working on that structure, there's not a lot of money for that, and it's very competitive. And the reason I put this slide up is to show that some of the materials and products that they're going to be talking about today are, the intent is that if you can put those in the structure when you're first building or when you're renovating, you ideally, that combined with occupant education is going to reduce the need for you to come back and have to ask or find funds for rehabilitation. So it really comes down to the asset preservation. This slide, I'm not going to go through it, but I just wanted to give you an illustration. These are some of, and the grants change by name year to year. This just gives you an idea of some of the more predominant programs that I've worked with tribes to help get funded. But as you can see on the far right column, there's very few of them that actually fund direct remediation in the home, which again goes back to, let's see what we can do when we're building it now to make this a more durable structure. So I'm now going to go back. I'm about to switch it over to our first speaker, who is two speakers, Tor Peterson and Doug Kennedy. Tor is with he was with the City of Seattle's Green Building Program, focusing on providing educational resources on residential green building projects. As research director at the Cascadia Region Green Building Council, he developed the Living Building Leader Professional Education Series, and while at the City of Seattle, he served as the primary author of the Green Home Remodel series of guides. Tor also contributed to the creation of the U.S. Green Building Council and the American Society of Interior Designers Green Residential Remodeling Guide, which is a mouthful. Anyway, he chaired the Bill Green Steering Committee, volunteered as Education Chair, the Central Puget Sound Chapter, and the Northwest Eco Building Guild. So as you can see, he came to me highly recommended. I have colleagues that have worked with him directly. and I'm just starting to learn about his work. I think he's going to be a great addition to the webinar today. And teaming with Tor is Doug Kennedy, who I have worked with over the last couple of years. He's been involved, as you can see, for over 35 years in building and real estate. He's Director of Operations at Pathway Design and Construction and a facilitator and a trainer for the TM4 group. And in that role, he provides employees, clients, and others in the community with indoor air resources. Doug also serves on the steering committees for the American Lung Association, Master Home Environmentals Program, Master Builders, Build Green Remodel Program, and the Northwest Eco Builders Guild. And he was also the award winner of 2 different awards that you can see there on your screen. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and switch, pull up their first slide. Excuse me for a moment. Okay. Tor and Doug, are you on the line?
We are here. Yes, Tor is here, and Doug as well.
Okay. Well, so welcome to Tor and Doug, and I'm going to let you go ahead and take it.
Great. Thanks, Gillian, and welcome to everyone on the webinar today. I'm happy to have this opportunity to be able to present to you some research that was actually inspired by the fact that this webinar was going to take place. Doug and I put our heads together about how to come up with a healthy building products presentation for you all, and basically decided that it was a prime opportunity to actually reach out to our community and find out what they thought were the best and most available healthy building products that could be incorporated immediately into a product, the low-hanging fruit, as Gillian called it earlier. So Gillian, did you want to proceed to the next slide?
Sorry, Tor, hold on a second. Okay, good.
And before I go on, Doug, is there any sort of general intro that you wanted to make?
Not at this time, Tor.
Okay, great, thanks. So Doug and I, without the benefit of visual cues, will probably be verbally cueing each other to incorporate a dialogue for this presentation, but I encourage you, Doug, at any moment to just pipe in with whatever you want to add to round out the conversation. I wanted to start this presentation by contextualizing healthy building products. We really tend to focus on the use phase of a product or material because that's when it's directly impacting the occupants in a building. I do think that it's important for us to think both upstream and downstream about the impacts of our products, and highly recommend all of you actually to go online at some point and do a search for the term or the term "story of stuff" and look up Annie Leonard's "Story of Stuff" cartoon. It's about a 15-minute long exploration of the impact, environmental health and human health impacts of products throughout the life cycle of their existence. It's a really I think educational and entertaining way to look at how products of all types kind of work their way through their life cycles. But this presentation today will be focusing on the use phase, but I wanted to mention that upstream, during the extraction and manufacturing phase of building products and all products, there are impacts as well. Those take the form of pollution that happens through refining practices. An example that I give here is that mercury is commonly used in gold refining to separate gold ores out of the mined materials. The byproducts of that refining process can impact air, water, and soils. This picture actually is a photograph of tailings from nickel mining up in Sudbury, Ontario, where there's been pretty tremendous devastation to the natural landscape from those mining practices and the toxins that they bring to the surface. During the manufacturing phase, we have worker exposures, we have emissions of toxic compounds into the air, water, and soil, and then illegal and often legal dumping. Our regulations around manufacturing are not particularly stringent. Actually, I would say the strictest regulation to actually focus on worker protection, which is great, but environmental protection and protection of the community's resources often fall by the wayside. Doug, anything you wanted to add on the extraction and manufacturing front?
Not at this time, Tor.
Great, thanks. Okay, Gillian. So as I said, and again to maybe borrow one of Gillian's phrases, the meat and potatoes of this presentation are going to focus on the use phase impacts of building materials and products. And I should mention quickly that we defined building material or product rather broadly. So it could be a material, it could be a more complex product or technology, or it could actually even be a design approach or something that you would build into the structure, a system, if you will. So you'll see examples of each of those when we get to our top 10 list. But the use phase is obviously very important. This is where we get into some of the really challenging public health issues around increased asthma rates, exposures to lead and asbestos, and other scary materials that we've built into our homes over the past. Those are exposures happen through a variety of routes. There are volatile organic compounds that are in products that end up emitting over time and contaminating indoor air. There's flaking and degradation of materials that happens, or leaching of compounds from materials for exposure. Especially young children are at risk for this sort of exposure. Mold and other biological growth that has, again, respiratory impacts and other exposure concerns. And then with maintenance and cleaning, we have a whole other suite of chemical exposures that can happen without careful selection of our cleaning and maintenance products. So that use phase really is a challenging phase to remedy all of the issues related to, but we try to get to different bits of those with each of the top 10 that we have identified, which you'll see. Next slide, please. And then again, looking at the full life cycle of a product or material, we have the disposal phase where, again, public health issues arise. We have combustion byproducts that happen. For example, PVC, polyvinyl chloride, when burned, releases dioxins, which are some of the most potent toxins known to humanity. Particulates from combustion also, again, form inhalation hazards in the ambient air, outdoor air quality issues. Landfill water and air emissions. We have landfill leachates that can contaminate water supplies if those landfills are not properly maintained. And air emissions, major greenhouse gas emitters, landfills are, for example. So definitely some concerns there as well. And I think one thing that's really interesting, given Gillian's review of where the money is available for dealing with healthy home issues in tribal homes and everywhere, really everywhere else, is the fact that actually it's usually during that disposal and remediation phase that the lion's share of the cost actually occurs. Just think about lead remediation on a property or asbestos remediation, and we're getting into huge amounts of money that are being expended to basically clean up for some decisions made in the past. So the more that we can build precaution into our decisions up front, the better off we're going to be down the line. Doug, again, I'll just invite you to make any comments if you have any at this point.
No, I think you've said it very well.
Great. Okay. Thanks. And then looking forward into the future, one thing to definitely put on one's radar is the fact that we've got a consistent line of existing and emerging hazards as well. So just as in the 1900s, basically, all the way up until the 1970s, we were building lead-based paint and other lead hazards into our homes, only now to slowly be pulling them out. We are basically developing a whole new suite of compounds which may be the future's lead or asbestos. There are 85,000 plus synthetic chemicals in use today across all product categories. Actually, Doug, you brought up this statistic, so if you want to give some context on where you found it, 17,000 different chemical compounds are found in the average home.
I actually pulled that out of a resource guide, which I believe you have listed, Tor. Steve Gilbert, in A Small Dose of Toxicology,
yes.
Had this listed as one of his findings. And I think the importance of this is in understanding that we're making our homes tighter and tighter for the energy efficiency. It's more important than ever to understand the home as a system, i.e. ventilation, and what our products as they interact create, because ultimately this is what will be impacting not only ourselves, our children, but the environment.
Thanks, Doug. I think that's absolutely true. The one thing that I find particularly alarming about the real soup of chemicals which we expose ourselves on a daily basis to is the fact these last 2 points on this slide kind of drive it home. Even basic toxicity information is unavailable for 3/4 of the top volume chemicals that are in commerce today. So, and basic toxicity information means that it hasn't even been tested in a test tube for toxicity against individual cells, let alone having us have any information on what it might do to mammals or human beings. And virtually none of these materials have been tested in combination, which is exactly how we encounter them in our homes and in the environment overall. So next slide, please. So given all that as context, we sent out this survey to a group of green building experts in the Pacific Northwest. I'll make a claim right now that my network is focused in the Puget Sound region. So we were, the list will be focused on materials and products that are most relevant to this region. I do think that in general this list does apply universally, but there are a few exceptions which we'll try to point to as we're walking through the slides. Again, it's focused on the use phase, so this is once these materials or products are installed in the home. I mentioned that there are a mix of materials, products, technologies, and design approaches. We really do think that these represent choices that can be made today to substantially improve indoor air quality and occupant health and keep it good into the future. And we also really see these as a first step toward healthier homes. So take this as sort of the maiden voyage. If we could back up one slide, please. Thank you. Gillian mentioned these, but I wanted to also make it explicit that when we surveyed our respondents, we gave them these criteria to select their top choices for healthy building materials. We also asked them to choose the one material that they would avoid putting into a home, and we aggregated those into a top 3 to avoid, which we'll show you. But these are materials that have hopefully been brought through the filter of availability, cost effectiveness, and durability along with health. I wanted to make a quick point here about cost effectiveness and affordability. We really took the asset management concept to heart and are talking from a life cycle perspective here. So some of these products may have a higher upfront cost, which is challenging to swallow here and there, but we believe that actually they return dividends, return on investment over time through their durability, through their increased health outcome and profile. So keeping that in mind, we'll explore those on each of the products as we list them as well. So next slide, please. So one that was mentioned by multiple of our respondents as a healthy and available building material was natural linoleum. So natural linoleum is, the term linoleum is often used and conflated with vinyl flooring. Natural linoleum, real true linoleum, is actually an all-natural product made up of a combination of linseed oil, oak and or wood and cork flour dust, and pine rosin and a few other natural ingredients that is then adhered to a natural jute backing, and is a resilient flooring that's actually been around for over 150 years. One of the reasons that it's considered healthier, first of all, resilient flooring in general, flooring that is resistant to the absorption of spills and dust, etc., and can't harbor dust in the way that that soft floor coverings like carpet can, are inherently healthier for the indoor environment simply by keeping contaminants out of the home. On top of that, however, natural linoleum is free of the chemical plasticizers and stabilizers that are used in vinyl flooring. Vinyl flooring can often contain phthalates, which are hormone disruptors, as well as heavy metals, lead and other compounds that are put into the vinyl to make up for some of the deficiencies of polyvinyl chloride as a plastic polymer. The natural linoleum does not need to include these additives because it naturally has the traits that we would want in a durable floor. On top of that, one of the reasons you'll often see it in medical settings, surgery labs, etc., is that it is naturally anti-static, meaning that dust will not be clinging to it in the way that it does to a vinyl flooring, which is has a natural static clinging action based again on the attributes of the polymer. But it's also slightly antibacterial. The linseed oil within the mix is not a particularly palatable place for bacteria to live. So that keeps it slightly cleaner than many other substances. I really like natural linoleum because of the fact that you can basically run it seamless, or you can weld the seams together. So if you're using sheet flooring versions of linoleum, you can have a continuous surface, which means there aren't cracks in which bugs can hide. The bonus with natural linoleum is its durability. It's called the 40-year floor for a reason. It's quite durable. The pigment actually runs through the full depth of the material itself. So scratches are not as apparent as that one false move on your vinyl floor, which ends up with a gash that you can't repair. So Doug, any comments you wanted to make on the linoleum choice?
I think, too, this is one product that you may find is a higher upfront cost, but the life cycle cost more than evens the total cost out. Secondly, you do have the option of using a fairly new product. It's called Click Marmoleum, and we've used this on many, many projects now, and very easy to install, very easy to maintain, so it does give you an option and another cost basis to look at.
Great, thanks for those, Doug. The Click linoleum concept is a really great one in my opinion. It's essentially the floating floor concept, and allows not only for that quick installation, but quick replacement if needed. Natural linoleum, like we mentioned, shouldn't need the frequent replacement that you get with vinyl flooring, though. Let's go on to product number 2. So another product mentioned by multiple of our respondents was the whole house ventilation and heat recovery function of an HRV, or heat recovery ventilator. There are various manufacturers of heat recovery ventilators, but quickly, just in terms of what HRVs do, they are a ventilation system that actually transfers some of the heat that is in the stale conditioned air within a space as it's being exhausted from the home, transfers that heat into the incoming ambient temperature air from outside, and reduces that energy penalty that's associated with ventilation. So once you've conditioned your air in a space, a little bit of a waste, then blow that all outside from the energy perspective. So one of the things that has always been problematic in the green building realm is this constant sort of friction between energy efficiency and ventilation. The heat recovery ventilator helps solve that contradiction or competition in many ways. Heat recovery ventilators can transfer up to 80% of that heat back into that incoming fresh air, so they're only a fraction of that heat is exhausted out of the house. They also can have pretty complex and effective filtration systems associated with them. So you get a filtration as well as heat recovery function with an HRV. There are various manufacturers. I would recommend actually going onto the Energy Star website, energystar.gov, and looking at the most energy efficient heat recovery ventilators that are out there. It's a good resource for finding specific brands. Brands with long-standing histories like Life Breath are ones that you probably would be well advised to look into as well. Heat recovery ventilators, because of them being sort of a new sexy product, more and more manufacturers are jumping on board, and they are of variable quality and performance. Another thing to look for in them is efficient motors. An ECM motor, electronically commutated motor, is going to be more efficient because it varies its speed to the need of the ventilation speed. Doug, you're probably much more of an expert on HRVs than me. What would you like to add on this slide?
Well, actually, possibly on the HRVs, these work well with just about any type of heating system, be it radiant, be it resistive, be it HVAC. If you made them up correctly, you can really do an awful lot for improving ventilation in the home, especially on retrofits or rehabs. Now, secondly, depending on the climate that we're in, you may have additional cooling needs. And so you may want to take a look at ERVs, or energy recovery ventilators, and they do a very good job of stabilizing humidity in that. And in areas where you have primarily heating needs, this may not be as big an issue, although stabilizing the humidity is a very good idea in those areas too. But in some cases, you may want to look at your ERV systems. I know in southern Idaho, I probably would take a look at this. I'm not sure if this is an issue up in Alaska, but you might want to take a look at that and make a decision based on your research.
Great. And actually, speaking of Alaska, the Cold Climate Housing Resource Center, I believe that's the full term. I've put a link in my resource page to that organization. They are doing research into HRVs in Alaska and the functionalities thereof. So definitely check out that resource. The third material, and I'm just looking at the time, we've got 15 minutes, so I will try to speed up on my presentation here and shorten it down per slide. There's so much to talk about. Efficient spot ventilation came up as a high priority issue within the survey as well. Really focused on bath ventilation, but also laundry and kitchen need spot ventilation as well. The manufacturer that came up repeatedly for bath ventilation was the Panasonic Whisper series. They, for a variety of reasons, the Panasonic units are probably the most efficient in a per watt, per cubic foot moved perspective. They're extremely quiet, and their sealed motors, permanently sealed motors, are very, very long-lasting. So those three elements, I think, conspire to make Panasonic the preferred, the Whisper series, the preferred ventilation fan. Once again, you get what you pay for. Panasonic fans are going to be more expensive off the shelf than the units that you'll find at your typical Home Depot or Lowe's. The thing is, the efficiency of the motor on a Panasonic will mean that the unit will pay for itself over time on that front alone. On top of that, the fact that they are quiet units, long-lasting, and durable means that you won't have the frequency of replacement that you have with those cheaper motors that you would be buying at the big box stores. But on top of that, their quiet operation encourages their use in the bathroom. So not having a noisy, clanky fan going on all hours a day means that the occupants will be more likely to actually utilize the spot ventilation for the length of time that is needed to exhaust the moisture within the room. Doug, anything you wanted to add about spot ventilation?
Not at this time, Tor. When we
Okay,
go
great.
on to the next slide.
Yeah, absolutely. So closely related to the spot ventilation is the idea of ventilation controls. Ventilation timers are really, in my mind, a no-brainer, but very important that you get a good quality timer that has at least a 1-hour timer function on it. You can get timers with up to 4 hours worth of ventilation timing and other features, including intermittent ventilation. I personally am a fan of the crank timer because I think it's an intuitive, from the occupant behavior front, I think it's an intuitive interface that users are used to and allows them to set it for a particular time. Presets, however, do allow for specific time frames to be set, which is helpful in terms of ensuring that the timer is set for a sufficient amount of time. Another approach that can be taken is to utilize humidistat, which actually activates the fan when the humidity level within the bathroom or laundry room gets to a certain level. These are all highly recommended just due to the fact that a fan is only useful if the occupant turns it on. Doug, anything you wanted to mention here?
Well, one of the things, and you basically just said it, Tor, it's only useful if the occupant turns it on. In dealing with our mold and moisture issues, we found that oftentimes if you didn't have a very quiet system, people wouldn't run the systems simply because they couldn't stand the noise. The timer tends to take that portion out of it. And then you had mentioned the use of humidistats and that. One of the things that we always throw out and recommend is during the life of the home, i.e. say you're in the home 10 years. During that time, periodically you want to recommission your heating and cooling and ventilation system. You want to go in and check and make sure that it is operating properly and is well balanced. And the thought of a humidistat in the bathrooms, periodically you'll probably want to make sure that they're calculating correctly and they haven't got out of balance. So the maintenance of the system becomes critical at this point.
Great. Thanks, Doug. That's one reason I'm a fan of the timer. It's just a simpler technology and lower maintenance requirements as well. Let's go on to healthy product number 5. And I'm going to speed myself up. I realize I have 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes left in our presentation, Doug, so we'll have to breeze through this. So zero and low VOC paints and finishes came up on our list of preferred building products and materials as well. So these are interior application finishes. A volatile organic compound is actually a blanket term for any carbon-based compound that converts to a gas at ambient temperatures and pressures. So at room temperature, it off-gases, essentially, to use a more common term. Some of these volatile compounds are toxic and or irritating. Others are actually benign. So VOC, the blanket term VOC and looking at the VOC levels on a paint really just tells you part of the story. It gives you a general indicator of the amount that will be off-gassing from that paint, but not necessarily about the health impact. This leads to my recommendation on this particular product class, which is to look for paints that have been certified through Green Seal. Green Seal is an independent third-party certification program that evaluates a variety of products but has a paint specification. The paint spec not only requires the paint to be low in volatile organic compounds, but also free from a suite of toxins and heavy metals that are commonly found in paints for a variety of reasons, and also establishes specifications for the durability and performance of paint. So its opacity and hiding power, its scrubbability, and other traits that you would want in a paint. So I really think the Green Seal certification is a home run on the low VOC paint front because it does have the added and more holistic set of requirements for a paint's performance. Doug, any comments?
No.
Great. Okay. So number 6 on our list, and again, these are not in order of prioritization. These products are just listed 1 through 10 for simplicity of reference. But low toxic mastics and caulkings were our next category of products. And actually, Doug, just feeling like you have so much more experience in this category, would you like to just describe this one to folks?
Well, I think with this one, Tor, what we really want to do is when you see a product on the shelf, or if your HVAC contractor or your carpenter is getting ready to use these adhesives, pull up the MSDS sheet and research it. And if you're not getting the information you need, go right to the website and pull it up off their websites. OSI, AFM, they're doing a very good job in putting out healthier products. There's a number of other manufacturers out there that do the same thing. But please do your homework on this one because the off-gassing potential over a long period of time in tighter homes can be very impactful. Go ahead, Tor.
Great. Thanks, Doug. I think we should just proceed on to product number 7. So we had a couple responses for insulation, and we broke that into 2 categories. The first one was cellulose insulation, or 2 product categories. We specifically are calling out green fiber because green fiber cellulose insulation now has a low dust and lower irritant version of their product. Given the fact that cellulose insulation is derived from recycled paper, usually newsprint, it does mean that there are side effects of that. Fibers that are recycled tend to dust, as well as the inks on those recycled papers can be irritants, especially to certain chemically sensitive individuals. So the low dust, low irritant version from green fiber is the way to go. One of the reasons I love cellulose insulation is that the borate fire retardant that is used on cellulose insulation is a very, very benign fire retardant, probably the most benign fire retardant that's out there. Most of the chemical fire retardants that exist, as opposed to this mineral fire retardant, have very concerning attributes to them. So the foam insulations that use the brominated or halogenated fire retardants are extremely concerning to those in the public health realm because they not only are toxic, but are bioaccumulative. We're seeing them accumulate in mammals, polar bear mother's milk, as showing accumulations of brominated fire retardants, for example. So we know that this stuff is entering the food chain and amplifying as it crawls up that food chain. So the non-toxic fire retardants, these brominated fire retardants that are within cellulose insulation, in my mind, are really sort of a no-brainer. Doug, anything you wanted to add?
On the green fiber IS770LD that's shown here, you may have to contact Green Fiber Direct. It's just now being introduced into the Western region. We have used it and really like the results.
Great. Okay, on to the next slide. So rigid mineral wool insulation also made it onto the list from the respondents. Basically, rigid mineral wool insulation is, again, a naturally fire retardant material. And there are several manufacturers. I put Roxol on here, and I forgot to put Thermofiber, which is actually another manufacturer here that you can get regionally. There's a kind of a double bonus with this stuff. First, being naturally fire retardant, it doesn't need those scary brominated and halogenated fire retardants that we find in expanded polystyrene, XPS, EPS, and polyiso plastic, foamed plastic insulations. But on top of that, what's important about rigid mineral wool insulation is that it can be used as an exterior insulation product. Exterior insulation is becoming more and more a hot button issue within healthy building circles because exterior insulation actually helps make sure that the stud bays in a home stay nice and dry by moving the dew point out of the wall assembly. Basically, there's a pretty serious concern with moisture accumulation within a wall assembly when you do not have exterior insulation. The exterior insulation keeps that exterior sheathing nice and warm, and again, that dew point out of the wall assembly. So, Doug, anything you wanted to add here?
Not at this time. A quick question to our moderator. At 10:50, I believe, Tom is scheduled. Should we move to Tom and then come back to our final slides?
Yeah, I'm thinking that's probably going to be a good idea if you guys don't mind, and then everyone can wait in suspense to hear what the last two products are and the three products to avoid. So, Tom Carney, you guys excuse me for a minute, I'm going to pull up. Computer's running a little slow, of course. Okay. So Tom Carney, who's with us this morning, is the Director of Grants Management for HUD's Northwest Office of Native American Programs. He's here in Seattle, and his office oversees a variety of funding to the 42 federally recognized tribes that are in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, primarily for housing-related services, and community facilities. Tom's worked for ONAP for the last 9 years. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in accounting from Washington State University, as well as CPA and CMA certifications, and he lives in West Seattle, which means that, for those of you out there who don't know, he has difficulty getting into the city now that they're tearing our viaducts down. But he's here in the office today, and he lives there with his wife and 3 boys. And Tom, I'm going to change the presenter to you, and he'll have his slides up in just a minute. Tom, can we hear you?
I'm on the air.
Okay.
Let me pull up my presentation. Oops. Let me get the right one there. And go to the full screen. Can everybody see the first slide?
Yes.
Great, great. Hey, thank you, Gillian, for that introduction. I'm anxious to see what the last 2 products are, but I'm just going to have to be in suspense like everybody else. Also, just a quick note on with the 3 boys, none of them seem to ever turn on the fan. So one of the things we're doing a bathroom remodel. One of the things we came up with, or they offer out there now, is a motion censored fan that turns on and will run for, you set the time how long it'll go, and we're putting that in the new kids' bathroom so that they are forced to use the fan and even bypassing the whole timer thing. So that's a neat product out there that Panasonic also offers. I just want to make sure I give folks a good introduction to the ONAP programs and some of the HUD programs. I'm going to quickly work through this and then try to focus on the opportunities that are out there and really the flexibility in the program, especially as it relates to building materials. With that, I'm not going to touch on all these ones, but on the summary screen, we've got sort of our core programs on the left, and then some other odds and ends on the right. Our core program, really our bread and butter, is the Indian Housing Block Grant. Title VI is kind of an offshoot of the Indian Housing Block Grant. It's a way to sort of borrow against your Indian Housing Block Grants and build up a little higher amount of funds maybe to do a development project or the like. ICDBG is a competitive grant program, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. That's available to tribes and has quite a variety of uses. Section 184 is a mortgage product for home ownership in Indian country, and then we've got some other grants that are funded through a variety of sources that we just touch on. We have the RIF grants, which is the Rural Innovation Fund. It replaced what some folks may have been familiar with, the RHED grant, which was Rural Housing and Economic Development. Both of those grants kind of have an economic development focus. We have some grants that go to tribal colleges and universities, and then some other odds and ends, including the 202-811 programs, which are elder and disabled housing, ROS, which is Resident Opportunity and Support Services grants, and then there's some Healthy Homes grants. These are outside of the ONAP group, but are available through HUD on a national basis. But that's just a quick intro to those, but I'm really going to focus on the IHBG and ICDBG programs. Background on the Indian Housing Block Grant, the IHBG. In 2011, there's about $639 million available nationwide. The Northwest got about $57 million of that. And of our 42 tribes that we work with here in the Northwest, we have a range of $77,000 for one grantee, all the way up to $6.5 million for larger grantees. And basically what drives the funding levels is population as well as demographics of the individual tribes here in the Northwest. Indian Housing Block Grant, and this is going to, it really ends up being the sort of the gist of the challenge. It's extremely flexible as far as what's done with the grant, but as with any program, I mean, that can create its own challenges. It's really up to the tribe to set their priorities on how the grants are used, and the big challenge, though, being that you've got a limited amount of money, and you've got to run your housing program. You've got to decide between new development, rehab, housing services, tenant-based rental assistance, or Section 8. It's really, there's so many options that you quickly run out of funds before you can get to all your priorities. But in relation to the building materials, the ones that I want to focus on really are a couple eligible categories. One's called Indian Housing Assistance, which is sort of a funny name for basically doing rehab of your older units, which we call the 1937 Act units, which were part of the predecessor program. In addition, development, which is really new construction, but also can pick up rehab efforts of more current units as opposed to those units that were developed under the 1937 Act. A couple of the other categories here that are referenced. Housing services is a wide range of activities. One of the things that I wanted to note, though, that was specifically called out, was energy audits, which is which we're seeing more and more of, and it's a great way to kind of set up that baseline. And I think it could really be morphed into sort of a healthy homes audit as well, to really see what you're taking a look at your housing stock, seeing what some of the gaps are or needs are with a particular unit or type of unit, and then starting to plan maybe how to take care of that through rehab or otherwise. A couple other items. Housing management services is a mix of sort of administrative activities. Crime prevention and safety, if you've got certain safety factors you want to deal with your units and population. model activities is kind of a catch-all for stuff that they hadn't really thought about when they came up with the program. A couple examples here. It's just a little bit older picture. I think it's actually, it looks like it's black and white. Under the utilization of the 1937 Act, or the Indian Housing Assistance category, it covers everything from maintenance of those units, operation of those units, as well as modernization, whether it's rental units or home ownership units. The big key here is that it's the older 1937 Act units. And frankly, these are we've had a huge amount of activity here in the Northwest with rehab efforts with some of these older units. They weren't always the best thought out projects back in the day, and there's been a lot of changes and different technologies that are out there now that can be utilized to really make these, to extend the life of these homes. The other category that I had referenced before was the development end, and really this is more newer homes that aren't the old housing stock, but covers everything from acquisition. You can go out and purchase existing units, or including apartment buildings, fourplexes, duplexes. Also do new construction, modernization, as well as some other site type activities. And the key reason I'm mentioning this is that with this development and or modernization, it's really being such a flexible program that you have the opportunity when you're doing new construction to make the choices that are going to both bring longevity to the project as well as bring certain healthy homes aspects to that project. And I'm going to try to touch on that a little bit more here. But it's a very flexible program, and ultimately it's really the tribe's determination how they want to go forward with the project. And this is what I was kind of referencing here. Ultimately with the building options, and this incorporates rehab too, but it's really the tribe makes the call on what will be done and how it's going to be done. And these options include in new construction, utilizing green standards, green practices, of which it's up to the tribe to make that call which one they might want to utilize or use a blend of. We don't have any. We encourage green building and green building incorporation of green building standards, but we do not require them. And we've seen a wide variety of utilization of some different standards, and I'm going to show a couple quick pictures later, but everything from the Evergreen standard, which the state of Washington is currently requiring for their tax credit projects, to some LEED Silver projects. We have some folks that are going for LEED Platinum. But it's not mandated by HUD or through the Office of Native American Programs, but it's been readily received and been incorporated in multiple activities. And as far as these options for utilization of the block grant, the rehab and then weatherization and energy efficiency, we've seen a lot of focus on those activities here in the Northwest, and that's that opportunity to bring into play whatever products fit the need or would work best in that particular locale. And we've seen everything from the whole house ventilation systems. We've seen a lot of replacement of old furnaces with heat pumps. We're seeing less and less utilization of carpeting and more of the durable flooring products. I don't know if I've actually seen the natural linoleum, but it's moving in that direction where we're seeing less and less of the carpets, less utilization of wood stoves, which is also a common feature in many of the Northwest homes. And again, with these options for what's going to be done, we see the tribes can actually set their own building codes in relation to the utilization of the block grant dollars. And that's where there's opportunities. I mean, you need to meet your tribal building codes, but this is where you can pull in those choice of materials to use what's going to be most beneficial to that particular community and serve the purposes of those particular housing projects. And the last thing, in relation to options, and this is sort of that local focus, is that the tribe has the option of going out to bid through sort of a normal procurement process, but also to utilize local tribal workforce, and that can be done. We've seen some tribes will have their own construction company that does both rehab and new development, or they may have a sort of a forced account group that's sort of an internal staff that just does home building or rehab. And like I had mentioned, there's always the option of going outside for these services or using a blend of both. But that utilization of sort of putting that money back into the local economy really has a positive. Here's just a couple examples that I was able to sort of pull together just off the top of my head. But we got a picture there on the right. I couldn't come up with a good photo of the project in process, but we had just recently I attended the dedication of our first IHBG funded anyway, straw bale building, or actually buildings over at the Coeur d'Alene tribe and by the Coeur d'Alene Housing Authority. That's that picture on the upper right. They built 3 sixplexes utilizing straw bale construction. And again, we have no restrictions on the type of materials involved, but we were very appreciative of the tribe sort of reaching out of their comfort zone to utilize something a little bit different. And so far, it's been very very well received by the tribe and the community. This was actually built with the Housing Authority's forced account group. So they actually built this themselves and have established some new skills. And we've also had a mix of the SIP panels, or the structural integrated panels. I'm not sure if I'm remembering that acronym correct, but that's been utilized consistently. We've had a mix of groups that have been utilizing radiant heat in the floors. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's been the exception to see carpets in new and rehab units. I think basically the folks that deal with the rental population are getting tired of changing out carpets, and that's been a very positive change of direction. The air exchangers have become a more common component. One thing I will note, and I was doing a tour of some homes over at the Spokane reservation about a month ago, and we talked with one of the homeowners in one of these new homes that incorporated that, and they didn't actually know what it was. So I think that really goes back to the key that educating your renters and your homeowners is a critical part of the process too, because if they don't understand what it does or how it might benefit them, they're more likely to bypass it or disable it, or what have you, or not maintain it. So education is critical. Also, the low VOC paints is becoming, I think it's getting harder and harder not to use them. The other picture I have on there didn't have any good interior shots, but the honeysuckle housing development was over at the Kalispell tribe up in northeastern Washington. And that was one of the ones that has achieved the LEED Silver standard, and that was done through the Recovery Act. So again, some very positive examples and innovations here in the Northwest. Other grant here I want to get to, the Indian Community Development Block Grant, or ICDBG. It doesn't have as much of a housing focus, but it's a very popular grant here in the Northwest. The NOFA, or the Notice of Funding Availability, is currently on the street as we speak, with applications due the 4th of January, 2012. Because of the timing of the fiscal year and everybody not getting along back in Washington and D.C., the actual funding levels haven't been determined. And as soon as we get those will get, the word will get out there. But this is a regional competition. last year, 2011, and we're hoping for similar funding levels. The national amount available was about $65 million. The Northwest got about $3 million of that. The grant ceiling currently is $500,000 per tribe. This is a tribal grant, and again, it's a very competitive, very popular grant here in the Northwest. The target market, basically, it's Native Americans, but you get the poorer the people you serve, the more points you get. So it's really targeted at low-income Native Americans. Mix of eligible activities, the ones that, and I've got them listed there, the ones that I'll focus on are really is in relation to this topic is the rehab and housing rehab and housing preservation. It's really, you can do a little bit of housing development, but they've made it very tricky or very challenging to work through that that approach, and also $500,000 doesn't go too far on pure housing development, but it can go quite a ways on the rehab and preservation. I know I went through that very quickly, but here's my contact information. I can be reached at. You're welcome to give me a call. I can provide you with some additional NOFA information. One other note on the ICDBG grant that I'll go back a slide. The rehab, there are some limits per unit, but in the Northwest currently it's $50,000 per unit. So it's a pretty robust amount of funds that you can go forward and do rehab with. The challenge is we only get about $3 million in the Northwest, and we're only able to fund 6, maybe 7 grants per year, and we usually get maybe 18 to 20 applications each year. So it's very competitive, and it's not just folks coming in for housing rehab. It also, we get a lot of community facilities, daycare centers, elder centers, infrastructure for housing, that type of thing are also very popular activities. But with that, I'll turn it back over to Gillian, and I encourage you to contact me, and I can try to make more sense out of some of the details of what I just touched on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. That was excellent. I'm glad you were able to provide specific examples, and the information was it was really helpful. And I should emphasize that these slides will be available after the webinar, if I haven't already said that. So, my screen. Okay, I lost my control panel. Bear with me for a second.
As you're doing that, Gillian,
Yeah.
would like to say thanks for Tom. He also threw out a couple of really good teasers leading back into the final slides on what to avoid. And so it tied in very nicely, and I knew he had an appointment that he had to make.
Yeah. Excellent. So we're going to go back. We're going to hear the last couple of products and the ones to avoid. And then last but not least, we're going to hear from David Vogt. So I'm going to jump right back to your slides, hopefully, theoretically. Here we go. Okay, and we went through that. So can everybody, well, my speakers, can you see slide 9?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
You're on.
Great. I also want to quickly say thanks to Tom, and yeah, there was a lot of interface there with what we were talking about, so I really appreciate that, and apologies for going long on this. It's just really hard to cram this information into a small space of time. So number 9 on our list, again, not in any sort of order of imperative or anything, was the concept of basically the shoe-free household and how to encourage that. So multiple green building systems, LEED for Homes, Built Green here in the Pacific Northwest, give points for homes that incorporate what they call shoe removal vestibules, which I think is a pretty fancy term just to say a place to take off your shoes near the front door and be able to store them. So basically a bench and a storage scenario for the shoes. It turns out that most healthy home experts would say that, you know, a #1 source of indoor contamination will be contaminants that are tracked in on the soles of occupants' shoes. So the more we can encourage folks to dock their shoes at the front door, the better. knowing that in reality there is a lot of resistance to that concept. Track-off mats and/or grading at the entry points are also a critical installation element in a healthy home. So one major benefit, I think, from the standpoint of sort of maintenance of the home is that the shoe-free households definitely mean significantly less housework in terms of cleaning up what gets tracked around the house. It also means less degradation to the surfaces within the home if you're not grinding dirt and other contaminants into the floor surfaces. So anything you wanted to mention here, Doug?
Actually just saw a track-off mat at a sustainable trade show that they guaranteed it would take approximately 90% of the mud off your shoes before you entered the house, and they demonstrated it, and it really was effective. I don't know if it got 90%, but it was very, very effective, and so the track-off mats really are helpful.
Yes, and that do work well is important as well. I know that the American Lung Association of Washington suggests that you find ones with substantial bristles on them so that they do get into the corners of your shoe treads, etc. And that you find one that can be easily hosed down with a garden hose outside on a regular basis to keep it from getting clogged up with that tract contamination. So let's go on to number 10. So another one that came up on our list from our respondents was the idea of yet another flooring option, and in this case it was hardwood flooring. We didn't ask for an in-depth explanation from folks, so I'll have to go on a couple of suppositions on why this came up a couple of different times. In my mind, it's for two reasons. One is that hard flooring, as we've mentioned, is just an inherently healthier home approach than carpeting. On top of that, hardwood flooring, solid hardwood flooring, is going to be free from glues and adhesives and resins that are used in composite flooring materials, which are likely to off-gas and contain volatile organic compounds. So a few other things that I would say on this slide is that if you are putting in hardwood flooring, look for low toxic, low VOC finishes to finish those floors. And one thing that came up on multiple respondents is that we should not only be installing hardwood flooring, but we should be installing sustainably harvested hardwood flooring. So the Forest Stewardship Council certification was brought up on that front. I guess a final thing in terms of, I think, why this made it onto the list is that hardwood flooring is one of the most durable flooring choices that can be installed in a home. Its expected lifespan gets into the 70 to 100-year range if properly maintained, and of a configuration that allows for multiple refinishings if needed. So this is definitely something to keep in mind as we move more toward creating durable as well as healthy homes. Anything you wanted to add, Doug?
Yes, a good option in regards to this are the pre-finished hardwood floors, and the reason for that is you eliminate the sanding process that is often involved with the installation of hardwood floors. The nice thing about that is you improve indoor air quality during the course of construction by eliminating the dust that can be kicked up from the sanding process. Go ahead, Tor.
Great. That's a great point, Doug. And maybe quick add-on there is the fact that although wood dust is a quote natural material, it has been proven in lab tests to actually cause nasal cancer in mice. So we know that it's not a benign substance. So to Doug's point, finishing off-site in a controlled facility is a really great idea. So those are our top 10 listed from our survey respondents. And again, we asked for 3 to avoid as well. So I'd like to quickly breeze through those. The first one that came up was formaldehyde in general, but the urea formaldehyde resin in particular. So urea formaldehyde resins are utilized, ironically actually, mostly in interior composite wood products, plywood, medium density fiberboards, particle boards, etc. Often use the urea formaldehyde resin because it's slightly cheaper than its cousin, the phenolic resin, but urea formaldehyde off-gases formaldehyde gas and actually has a 20-year half-life. So 20 years after you've installed a product that contains urea formaldehyde, it's still emitting gas at half the rate it did when it was the day it was made. A way to avoid this: look for exterior grade engineered and composite wood products for use in and utilize those in interior applications. Those slightly more expensive exterior grade glues do not off-gas urea formaldehyde. Also, a product that often contains urea formaldehyde is fiberglass insulation, where it's used as a binder to keep the fiberglass particles or fiberglass strands nicely fluffed up, basically. The formaldehyde-free versions use different resins that do not contain urea formaldehyde. So that is number one to avoid. Number two, the next slide, are low-quality furnace filters. The market is awash in very low-quality furnace filters. These are the ones that you usually get off the shelf from your big box retailers that cost about $1 a piece. They're essentially useless and in some cases can actually damage furnaces. If you can see through a furnace filter, it's probably not a good filter. These flat panel furnace filters are usually made from a fiberglass, horsehair, hog's hair, foam media, and all really should be avoided. These don't do anything to filter out contaminants. They're basically there to keep birds and rocks from getting sucked into your furnace. So what you should be looking for is a higher MERV rating, which the MERV rating is the minimum efficiency reported value, I think is what MERV stands for. But basically, it's a rating system put out by the Association of Air Conditioning Heating Engineers, and runs in a scale from 1 to 16, I believe. Basically, anything under 6, according to those that established the MERV rating, which is ASHRAE, should really is not recommended. And if you look at other reference standards, LEED recommends a MERV rating of 8 or better. So that's an example there of a little bit more stringent than what the Society of Heating Engineers recommends. On top of all this, really critical is that folks change their filters regularly. So again, back to that occupant behavior, often filters are left in for years, and they really should be changed roughly on a monthly basis during the heating season. And the higher the MERV rating, the more it's going to catch, and therefore the more frequent you actually will want to change these. So Doug, what would you like to add on these slides? This slide.
A lot of our mentors and HVAC people indicate a MERV rating of 11 to 14. If your furnace will accept it, is a very good range to be in. And likewise, it's very important both on your heating and cooling systems and your HRV, ERV systems to locate the systems where the people can get at the filters to change them. That's one of the biggest reasons they don't get changed and lead to system failures.
Very good point. Great. Thanks, Doug. Okay, and on to our third, which again, these are not in order of avoid either. Carpeting is probably at the top of the list for products to avoid if you want to have a healthy home. Really, if you think about it, carpeting is just a sink for all sorts of contaminants. The thicker the pile of the carpet, the more it can hold. The let's see, who was it that did this? I think it was the Washington Toxics Coalition did a survey where they actually went out into Seattle homes and took samples of dust from carpets as well as surrounding hard surface areas and did a comparison, a toxicological analysis. They found that somewhere upwards of 40% of the carpets in Seattle homes had lead dust levels in them that exceeded Superfund cleanup standards. So carpet just becomes the perfect place for contaminants to hang out. The less carpet you can install, the better. There are soft surface materials, softer surface resilient flooring materials such as cork that can be used if a soft surface is required within a home. And if carpet is going to be used, look for very low pile, easy to clean carpet that won't act as much as that sink. The Carpet and Rug Institute has a certification system for carpeting called Green Label and Green Label Plus. The Green Label Plus certification is the more stringent standard. This only covers the toxins and emissions that are released from new carpet. So this is not an evaluation of the carpet's ability to act as a sink for contaminants, but instead, what is it emitting? What does that new carpet smell, basically, which we know is actually not healthy for us. So if you are going to go the carpet route, though, look for a low pile, CRI certified Green Label Plus carpet. Doug, anything you'd like to add?
No, except I think we should give our carpet industry a lot of credit because they are addressing these concerns and coming out with better products all the time.
It's true. They've been one of the more responsive industries when it comes to health concerns. So I will give them that credit. You're right. Super. Thanks. So that's it. Those are our top 10 and 3 to avoid products. I did want to mention just sort of as next steps, saying this was just the first step in moving toward healthier product specification for tribal homes, is that it can be challenging to find safer and healthier products for a home. There really is no comprehensive information source out there. On my resource page that Gillian will distribute or make available along with this presentation, you'll see a few information sources there. Environmental Building News, also known as buildinggreen.com, is a good resource, for example. The Healthy Building Network is another great place to find information on healthier products. But when it comes to actually finding products, it can be challenging. There's more and more what we call in the industry greenwash going on, where product manufacturers are claiming health and environmental benefits to their products that are not well-founded. So it pays to adopt the caveat emptor stance when looking for building products. Requires keeping up to date on products as well. So this is an ongoing research task, and my guide is really just to start. So let's see, just the last couple slides here. So there are retailers in the Puget Sound region, such as Green Depot and Green Home Solutions. More generally, I really do think that it comes down to hunt and peck at conventional and big box retailers. You need to go in with your list of specifications and find products that really match those specifications. Next slide. And my advice to all of you would actually be to collaborate. It really does take a village to be able to build a healthy village. We need to share our ideas, our successes and failures, and our discoveries. Creating an ongoing community of learners, I think, would be highly recommended. If you all are networked in any sense, utilize that network to share those experiences. And better yet, I really think that creating a coalition of purchasers could go a huge ways toward changing the marketplace. So next slide, please. I really think that that coalition of purchasers could do a lot by normalizing procurement language around healthier products for your projects, using referencing established standards such as LEED standards for healthy products, and as well as looking to local governments that have done a lot of research on green purchasing. The City of Seattle and King County are really at the national forefront for environmentally preferable purchasing, which includes some resources around building products as well. And I really think that there's an opportunity for cooperative purchasing agreements to really be able to leverage a larger purchasing pool to get lower prices, access to some products that may be still harder to find, getting those products regularly stocked on shelves rather than special order items. So that's, oh, Doug, please, I've left you behind for a couple slides. Anything that you'd like to add?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for their time and energy and efforts in this, and we can make a difference, and our children will be the recipients of that difference. And with that, go to Tom, or to David, excuse me.
Hi. Hey, you guys, thank you. These two are amazing speakers, an enormous body of knowledge that they have, and when I send out a follow-up, I think you've got some of their contact information, but I'll make sure that you can reach Doug and Tor, as well as the companies and the training organizations that they work with if you're interested in working with them further. So, David, thanks for your patience, and for those of you on the call from Alaska, we're really looking forward to hearing from David. And briefly just show, I'm going to read his bio. He's, again, with HUD from the Office of Native American Programs, and he's served in several positions since 1988, including Chief of Housing Management, Director of Grants Evaluation, and the Native American Program Specialist. He was recently appointed the Sustainability Officer for Alaska, which is great. And previously he held positions as social worker with BIA as a program administrator and executive director of the Copper River Basin Regional Housing Authority. He's a graduate of Pennsylvania State University, certified housing manager, certified home buyer counselor, and a cancer survivor with more than 33 years of experience. So I wish we had a whole other hour to hear from David, but for right now, David, I'm going to switch the screen over to you, and you'll see, if everyone waits for a few minutes, I'm going to have David use the remainder of our time, and I'm going to send out, you can email questions directly to it, because I think I'd rather have us have time to hear from David fully than cut into his time for questions and answers. So David, are you there? So I'm not, if everyone's listening, we're just having a little bit of a glitch. There's David. Says he's presenter. I think he's, it's in transition. So David, can you hear us? We can't hear you at this point. While we're waiting for David, what I'm going to do is suggest that if anybody has questions now for Tor or Doug, Tom's not on the call anymore, you can use your question box. You can raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can type a question in. And just go ahead and put any questions in now while we're waiting, and then as soon as we get David connected, we'll switch back to him. David, is that you? Okay. So one of the questions that came up while we were asking was about sort of accessibility to some of the products. Like, someone wanted to know a little bit more about the cooperative purchasing agreement. So Tor and Doug, do you want to address that and how that works?
Tor, can you speak to the City of Seattle and King County?
Yes, I can speak roughly to that. I've got to admit that I'm not a procurement specialist, but when working at the City of Seattle, I worked with our procurement staff to help green up our specifications, as well as working on some cooperative purchasing and contract writer sort of scenarios. So the City of Seattle has contracts out there with some major suppliers. It usually works with the with the bigger box retailers, etc. Office Depot, for example, we worked with to get government pricing on office supplies, including processed chlorine-free, 100% recycled paper from a regional manufacturer here in Washington State. So we were able to actually work with Office Depot to get them to carry the product in the first place, and then offer the a discounted rate. And with Seattle and King County doing that, then other municipalities were actually able to ride on the contract that we had and get that same preferential pricing. I've got to admit to being completely unaware of exactly how this might be able to play out on the tribal front, but I thought that it was a really intriguing model that really just leveraged multiple buyers' potential buying power to get preferential pricing, as well as availability of products that weren't previously available through these retailers. And that pretty much exhausts my knowledge on that front.
We've actually done it on the private sector also, where we see a new product. An example would be the green fiber low dust, and contacted the manufacturers directly and asked fellow builders in that to team together to form a buying group, and the manufacturers will tend to listen, plus we can often reduce the initial purchase prices based on that.
One thing I did want to offer, Gillian, actually, is if any of the folks on the phone today are interested, I would be happy to contact one of the procurement folks at the City of Seattle that I'm close colleagues with, and would be happy to find out if she would be willing to talk to them and brainstorm about how you might be able to replicate this among the tribes.
Excellent. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'll put that in. I have one other question I'm just going to ask. We're having a few difficulties getting David, and I'm just going to check really quickly. David, can you hear me? No, we have a technical barrier between here and Anchorage. And I know I wait, and I have no idea how to close that gap. So I really apologize that we can't hear from David Bowe, but I am going to include the slides and the information because he's doing some really good work. And I believe he's also working with the Cold Climate Housing Research Center. But some of the projects they're doing are something that Alaska Tribal Housing Authorities, if you're not already familiar with his work, would want to follow. So I am going to, there's one more question. We've got a few more minutes before we wrap. I just want, one of the things I want to say before I go to the last few questions is that if you haven't already joined our working group, just go to the website that you see there. You'll see a page that says click join. You don't necessarily need a letter or anything from your tribal council, or if you're an agency, you're welcome to join as well. And it's basically an informal networking group. We share resources through webinars, technical assistance, the occasional training opportunity. So with that, I'm going to go one of the last questions here before we close out. Is someone asked about bamboo and whether or not it was actually better than hardwood. And I'm sure there's pros and cons, but you guys want to take just a minute or two before we wrap up to speak to that?
I could speak briefly to it, and then I would love to hear Doug's take on it. One of my concerns with bamboo flooring, it does have, it passes the standardized durability tests in the flooring industry with flying colors because of its hardness, but it actually still is a porous material. One thing that does concern me is that it's a composite material. It requires a resin to hold the bamboo fibers together, and often The manufacturers of these products are halfway around the world, and it's exceedingly difficult to get detailed information about what is in those resins. So some have gone through certification programs to evaluate their off-gassing potential, but many have not. So it's one of those things where you really need to do your research if you want to focus in on bamboo. And then I think a final kind of just personal observation is that in my mind, if you can go for a regional supplier of a hardwood that's grown here in the Pacific, in your region, in the Pacific Northwest, in my case, I think there's a lot to be said for that, just in terms of keeping it local, keeping your money in the local economy, and supporting your local foresters. So that's my thought. What about you, Doug?
Well, my thoughts would mirror Tor's. If we do go with a bamboo-type product, we really try to find out point of origin and resins that are being used. And for durability, we would want to really take a look at what's called stranded bamboo and do our research before we used it.
Okay, well, I'm sure that there's actually nobody's typed in any more questions, and I think it's because it's 20 minutes to noon, and everyone's probably getting back to work. So I just want to thank everyone who participated, but of course the speakers who were brilliant and highly informative and a great resource, and a reminder that there's so many things we can do on the ground without having to adopt a comprehensive green and healthy building program. So please join our working group and let us know if you have any questions. The website that you see there will have this recorded webinar posted within a couple hours or maybe tomorrow, depending on how the day goes. But you will be able to access all of this information on our website. Just click on the tab for webinars. So again, thanks to the speakers and to everyone else. And that's the end of the webinar for today.
Thank you, Gillian.
Yes, thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.